Hello and welcome to Open Minds UFO Radio. I am your host Alejandro Rojas, and I have with me my good friend Martin Goofball Willis.
Yeah, that's me. Sometimes, yes.
Quite often, pretty much every show, which is what people enjoy about, well, I should say what some people enjoy about the beginning of the show is our goofball antics. And so I definitely appreciate your goofballness.
Some people. Yeah.
Right. Some.
Yeah.
I think it's many. But just to inform people, because I'm informing this for those people who don't like it so much, that to give people a little bit about the show, we cover credible UFO news and information kind of in a journalistic way. I'm a journalist, I write, so we look for substantiated and credible information, and if we speculate, we're going to let you know that. At the beginning of the show, we review the news, Martin and I, and then I bring on the guest at the second and third segment. So if you're one of those people who do not enjoy the goofballness, actually jocularity, there's these hosts in Denver who used to always say, oh, if you don't enjoy your jocularity, then you can just skip right up to 25 minutes in and get to the interview. But our guest today is MJ Banias, and he's great. He is a blogger, an educator, and a writer. He's written a book. He's been a field investigator with the Mutual UFO Network. He's got a website called Terra Obscura, and what I like about MJ, this is the second time I've had him on, he's definitely more of a deep thinker. He likes the sociological and philosophical aspects of all of this, how it affects the culture in general. And of course, that's a topic that I love myself. And this particular moment in time, I think that's really important, especially once we get to the news. We're going to see that. So I always love talking to MJ. And so we got him on. He's got a new book called The UFO People, A Curious Culture, which is kind of about all these topics that he likes to speak on. So I know you had him on last week, right, Martin?
Yeah, the week before last, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
He is a lot of fun.
I really like him a lot. Yeah.
So last week I had on Anthony LaPay, and I got some feedback that I was really screwing up his name, and I was calling him Andrew occasionally when his name is Anthony. So I apologized for that, because a lap is certainly not as nice as a LaPay. Were you saying his name correctly?
I did, but that's uncharacteristic of my normal pronunciation.
So, and I apologize for that, because he was an excellent interview, and as I said in the show last week, I was traveling, and I kind of, like, to be honest, ducked into the bathroom on my cell to do the interview, and I recorded it, because I record all my interviews because I like to get my quotes exact, and because this was going to be for print. I didn't realize, and then they thought it was going to be for audio and print, so they allowed me. So I said, hey, I'd more than love to post this audio, so I did. And yeah, a lot of people really liked all of the interviews that some of us got with him.
Yeah, he is. He's very articulate and very interesting guy.
Well, it's really interesting to hear from a conventional kind of, investigative journalist doing stuff like getting out there in war zones and, covering military and stuff like that. It's interesting to hear from a guy like this what he thinks about UFOs, and his reaction to the whole Pentagon UFO program and to the stars and everything. So, it was great to hear from him and his thoughts about, how he felt going into the show Undisclosed, which is going to air Friday.
That's right, coming up. I can't wait. Even though I've already seen it, I can't wait for the series. Can't wait for episode 2.
I
since
know.
we got to see the screeners.
Yeah, we've got to see episode 1, Martin and I. We've already talked about it. I've got a review out. We both really liked it, so excited for all of you to see it on Friday. I shouldn't say all of you, though, because you and I both have a lot of friends that are not in the United States. And unfortunately, just like Project Blue Book, the television show, this isn't going to launch where it's going to be accessible to people outside of the States. There's a couple ways you can deal with that. You can be patient and wait, because Project Blue Book has started now in other countries. However, a lot of people are saying, you know, if you go online, you can do these proxies. You can use these proxy services. They're kind of VPN. If you do that, then you can watch them.
Wow, so they're geo-blocked, basically.
Yes, they are geo-blocked.
Wow, interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, they do that with TV and movies, and I don't understand the business and why they do all that, because it can be frustrating, and it is sad because, you know, all of our European listeners or otherwise are can't see the show or enjoy what we're talking about, and I know that's frustrating for them. So, yeah, see what you can do. Look into the proxy thing.
It's only like $5 a month or something.
Yeah, you know what I would do too? Go to Open Minds UFO News Group. You know, our Facebook group. If you're on Facebook or on Twitter, you could do it there, or any of our social media, and post. You know, hey guys, I'm in this country and I'm trying to watch the show. How can I do it? And we've got a lot of helpful people in there who I'm sure will pipe up. I'll make sure somebody pipes up and says, here's how you do it, so you can figure that out.
Great idea. I never even thought of that, but you're totally right.
Mm-hmm.
That I always think, because we can watch it, that everyone can, but that's absolutely true. When I've been traveling, I've seen that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It is frustrating. I've had that happen to me as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the news. There's a lot to talk about there. So go ahead. I'll let you start.
All right. Well, I wanted to jump right into this New York Times article called, Wow, What Is That? Navy pilots report unexplained flying objects. Now, this just aired yesterday. Leslie Kane, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helen Cooper are all co-authored that article that just came out. It's funny, my son, who's more or less a skeptic of this topic, wrote me yesterday in the middle of the day, like, look, this just came out. And so I thought that was pretty funny. And then later heard from Leslie on that. But anyway, what I'd really like to talk about, though, is a follow-up article that Tyler Rogueway, I know he's been on your show. He is on the War Zone.
One thing, too. That list of people that you just listed that wrote this New York Times article, they're the same crew who wrote the original New York Times article about ATIP that made a big deal.
Yeah, that's right. Although I don't know, I only have this online. I don't believe it made on the front page like the other one did, but I'm sure it's definitely getting a lot of activity, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that Tyler Rogueway points out in his article is something that was kind of, according to his, I'm paraphrasing here, but the New York Times sort of glazed over, is the radar tech that is key in this detection. Now, this goes back to off the East Coast and like 2015. The Tic Tac, of course, was 2004 on the West Coast. But this is on the East Coast. In between Virginia and Florida, these pilots were seeing these objects, and two of them have identified themselves. And one of them is Lieutenant Danny Acoin, and the other one is, I'm looking for his names, Lieutenant Ryan Graves. Mm-hmm. So they were both in FA-18 Super Hornet, and they are out there with this new technology, and it's called AESA, which is Active Electronically Scanned Array. And formerly they had what was called PESA, which is a Passive Electronic Scanned Array. And the advantage that they have now with the AESA is it has a capability of the advantage of it is that there's different modules, and it can send out several different frequencies. and that is which they were never able to do before, because originally the passive one had a single source split into hundreds of signals. So this, they can send out all types of signals. So anyway, they're picking up things that they never picked up before, and this actually has something to do with all the sightings that they see now. But they did list the characteristics of what they were seeing of up to 11 hours of flight. Now, the one thing that I had a question, I don't know if you thought about this, Alejandro, but if they were actually seeing this and observing it for 11 hours, why didn't they, I don't want to say engage, but why didn't they go and try to get really close to it and observe what it was doing?
Well, that's what's interesting is they did. So apparently, when these new radars came online, they started seeing these objects, similar to like what Kevin Day and people in the Nimitz reported. They saw them at higher elevations and dropping to lower elevations very quickly at times. They said specifically that they saw them at 30,000 feet, 20,000 feet, and right at the surface, and, kind of bouncing in between. Or, like you said, often sitting there for hours. And they're saying, first of all, the mechanics of something moving very quickly, the properties an aircraft has, for instance, let's take a Harrier that can hover in place. It's, that jet. Mm-hmm. But it can't go very fast. So it's a trade-off. Whereas things that go very fast can't go very slow, or they'll fall out of the sky. So they don't understand, this already is a characteristic that we cannot achieve, to hover and go very fast at the same time. Lieutenant Graves actually refers to that. So they're all freaked out about these things they're catching on radar. They did try to go look at them. In fact, Graves, or I think it was Acoin, one of the pilots, said that, and they were all on the Roosevelt, just so the Theodore Roosevelt. Oh, yeah. That's the aircraft carrier they were on. Mm-hmm. He says that he went on a couple of times to go look for them, and he found them on radar. He got to the merge plot. Fravor talks about that. That's where you're in the same space, similar area to the object, and he could not visually see them. So at that point, they didn't know what was going on. They believed something was really there. They were thinking they must have been advanced drones that were being tested, because they're training in, military training areas. But that all changed when one day one of these things went zipping past two of the jets. So two of the jets are flying, one and their wingman. They're 100 feet apart, and this object that looked like a cube with a circle around it, like a cube in a beach ball, some are describing it, or a cube in kind of a circular kind of force field or something. Fravor even spoke about this in Oregon, because he knows these pilots and talked to them about this event. So it's like, these cubes in some kind of circular force field or something like that. But this thing went zipping past them, and they told everybody, and that freaked them all out. At that point, they were taking this very seriously, because, of course, that's hugely dangerous. Plus, to them, it indicated this isn't ours. None of our guys would fly a test drone in between or anywhere near us where it could put us in danger. So this cannot be ours. So really interesting. Tyler Rogueway now says, he's speculating. He's saying, well, it could still be ours. Just because it accidentally hit one of our planes or got close to that doesn't mean it's not ours. It could have been a mistake. He says, now, I'm not saying that it's definitely that's the case, but we have to keep that, we have to consider that. And he's got a good point, until we can absolutely rule out that it is not some sort of advanced, secret project, we can't rule it out. However, he makes the point that this is still extraordinary, just like he wrote about with the Nimitz encounter, because it proves that these objects exist, that objects moving at incredible speed and using propulsion that, we're not used to, that can do these incredible things, they're real. They've got to be out there. Now the question is, are they ours or not? And he agrees that, the technology is so advanced, it's likely, well, it would be hard to say it's ours, but of course it would also be extraordinary to say it's not ours. So either scenario is kind of far-fetched, or at least difficult to conclude.
Yeah. Wow. No, it's really amazing to think that if it is our technology, that we could be that far advanced, and it would be also amazing that nothing was ever leaked about it.
Right, and that's what Fravor said. Some people had asked, well, what do you think these things are ours? In fact, that was the only question I got in Oregon. And some of the information about what Fravor had said in Oregon at the McMinnville conference now, over a week ago, has come out. Like, for instance, a video was posted, and then it was taken down.
I saw that. Taken down right away.
The good part is it confirmed what I had said, because people were saying, oh, you did Alejandro exaggerate this or something, which I did not. Like I told you, if anything, I put it mildly. But that was taken down. Now, Danny Silva, and I've got the article on the front page in the UFO headlines, he wrote an article about all of this, and he called it UFOs hovering for days just sitting there. And he took some quotes from Fravor, and so you could see some of what Fravor says there about these hovering objects. But one of the things he said is, and I just wanted to hear his perspective, because some of the people, like one of the things that some people had gotten frustrated with me about it is I really didn't put much stock into this idea that it was a missile being tested in the area in San Diego when Fravor had his sighting, because what Fravor describes is something sitting there. Then as he approaches it, it matches his maneuvers and then speeds off at a really fast speed that does not fit a missile whatsoever. So he says
Plus
that...
no propulsion signature, nothing.
Right, no propulsion signature, anything. He says that just like these guys on the Roosevelt, his first instinct was that must be some sort of top secret project. That was extraordinary, and it blew his mind, but he thought that's what it must be. But over time, he says that he felt that couldn't be the case. He felt as more time goes on, it's more likely not ours, because there's no way they could keep that secret. And he even referenced a couple projects that were black projects in the past that eventually we found out about. And it's his belief that we eventually find out, when time passes 5-10 years, we find out, but we haven't found out about, these technologies. So he feels strongly they are not ours. By the way, there are also skeptics who are talked about the gimbal video, and it turns out it comes from the Roosevelt. So these guys said not only did they try to engage him, getting back to your question, one of them did get that video of the thing moving close to the water, and then the other video. So it seems like both the other two videos are from this Roosevelt incident.
And that one is that one is the one that was on the first New York Times article also.
Yeah,
online,
one of them was, and then one of them wasn't. The one that's referred to as the gimbal, you see this object and it seems to move in a weird way, rotate. Some skeptics have said that it's a regular jet and that is just the camera moving. Even our good buddy Mark D'Antonio, that is not indicating an object that's rotating. Well, Fravor spoke to that, and he said that's absolutely false. There's no way. And here's his argument, that they cannot rotate. An aircraft, as it flies, he says, airplanes have something called wings. You need your wings to fly. If you turn at a 90 degree where your wings are above you, you're not achieving any lift, and you'll fall out of the sky. And
that's
this
right.
thing didn't do that.
Right
So,
to whatever direction you're tipped. Yes.
Yeah. So we see planes do that, right? As novices. The rest of us, we see planes go sideways like that. But he makes a point. If you're going to do that, you have to bank, because you have to make some G-forces for your wings to create the lift. And the only people who will do that sometimes is the Blue Angels can do it in a way where they kind of play with their tail, but they move slower and they still begin to fall, but that's obviously not what this thing was doing. So this thing was definitely not, just a plane rotating or something like that. And a lot of people have already proven that it wasn't just the optics moving. But when you listen to Fravor especially address this, these guys work with this equipment. They know this equipment very, very well, and they know the nature of other aircrafts that they're flying with very, very well. So you get the sense that, I apologize to Mark and to others, but this guy's got a lot more experience with this equipment and the nature of the objects that they're filming than our good buddies Mark D'Antonio and stuff do.
Yeah, right. One of the things in this article that just came out that they when they're describing the vehicles, they're saying that they're rotating.
Right.
These are all rotating. And that's what it looks like in the gimbal.
Right.
It looks like something that's actually rotating,
which
is another bizarre situation. But the part where you mentioned the cube going by with something rotating around it, or like a force field or something around it, that is really fascinating.
Isn't it freaky? Even Tyler's like, this sounds like Star Trek. It sounds crazy, but he's like, it's real. If these pilots say it's real, it's real. These guys are pros. Because, Tyler works with defense. That's what he does every day, writes stories about defense and talks with pilots. So, and he said he even knew about a lot of these encounters before they were made public, just because the word is spread inside of the community. So really interesting. Another interesting thing is Lou Elizondo was on Coast to Coast last night with George Knapp. They talked about a few things. One of the few things they talked about is in the second episode, there will be a map that ATIP created about UFO hotspots. So that sounds really interesting. Let's see. They also addressed a couple things, such as Lou getting attacked by different people online. And he said one thing that I backed up too, which was that, some people, and I guess we won't mention names, Lou didn't, have said that, that Lou and others and TTSA has not reached out to them despite their requests, people who are kind of questioning Lou's integrity, and that's not true. He has reached out. He's reached out to practically everybody, and I've facilitated. Well, to be honest, it was Greenwald, and he did reach out to Greenwald, and Greenwald did not reciprocate, unfortunately. So hopefully that'll happen over time. But another story came out too, speaking of Greenwald, which is that the Pentagon finally admits it investigates UFOs. So there is big questions about whether or not the Pentagon the DoD released the UFO videos. They've admitted they have. And now this is a big story because finally, and we have something similar in this New York Times story, they've kind of changed their tune. Now they are fessing up. And countering what they said in the past. In the past, they said, we don't know if ATIP was UFOs. We can't tell from our paperwork. And so people are like, see, look, they didn't even have anything to UFOs. But they made it very clear. They also in the past said that the ATIP program's closed and they're not looking into UFOs anymore. They said ATIP was closed, essentially. That also is not true. So they did come out and say that ATIP was investigating UAPs, and that they still look into them and take them seriously. So this is pretty crazy. This is pretty cool. Yeah. This is the DoD admitting, that they did, through ATIP, look into UFOs, and they continue to do so.
Amazing. Another major, it's another really major story.
It is, and it's another admission. It's another thing that, first of all, speaking of Leslie, a great reporter, it's another thing that the New York Times and Leslie and the others told us to begin with that has been true. And of course, Lou and the To the Stars people have been telling us all along the same stuff. So, all of this stuff they've been telling us, it keeps getting verified as being true. Another interesting thing is in this New York Times article, the DoD says that, I think this quote is really important. I'm going to find it real quick because it's, even though we're almost running out of time, aren't we? But essentially, it's the DoD saying that, yes, people are reporting these objects. We do take them seriously. We don't know where they're coming from. Yeah.
Basically says no one at the Department of Defense is saying that the objects are extraterrestrial. And experts emphasize that earthly explanations can generally be found for such incidents.
Can generally be found, but they even said we don't know who they are or where they're coming from, and that's what we need to find out.
Yeah.
So really interesting. But we're out of time. Of course, all these stories you can find on the front page of openmind.tv. A couple other good stories that are out there on all of this as well.
Yeah, right. Okay.
All right. Well, time flies, huh, Martin?
Yes, as always.
It is time to go. So thanks for joining us once again, and let's go ahead and talk to MJ. I am very happy to welcome back to the show MJ Banias. Hello.
Alejandro, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm terrific. Thank you very much for having me on today.
Thanks for being here. It's my pleasure. You know what? I think I'm going to start off with, which is kind of strange, but it is kind of in the moment. Stanton Friedman. It's, of course, this very sad news that he passed. What was Stanton Friedman to you? Like, how did you first hear about him? What are your, is your perspective on him and his work?
Yeah, I mean, Stanton was, even though he was born in the States, he was a fellow Canadian. So as a Canadian, he was one of those UFO researchers that, influences people like me. I mean, there's countless American UFO researchers and ufologists, but he was sort of a different breed. And I sort of joke. I think part of it was because he was Canadian. He was a very classy ufologist and a very classy researcher. He never really got into petty arguments with anyone. He just sort of did his own thing. He did his conference lectures and all that, but he always kind of maintained a sort of, a sort of attitude of professionalism and respect, I think, for other people, at least those who he sort of maybe liked. I don't know, at times I'm sure he went after a few people, but ultimately, he was sort of a class act. So I think he was a role model for a lot of us, especially us Canadian UFO researchers.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And you know what? Somebody said it, and I can't remember who. Maybe it was you, that they were at a conference, and they're like, I didn't really know him. The only interaction I had with him was he walked up to me, and he said, hey, I'm glad you're wearing a tie. We're the only two speakers wearing a tie. And
I wish that was me, but no, it wasn't. That's a good one, though. Yeah, I remember reading that, actually, as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's a big loss. And what do you think it means? Since you've been looking at the community overall and kind of the effect on society that this all has, what do you think it means to the field, Stan's passing?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we've definitely lost a role model. I think there's been a lot of talk in the UFO community over the last few days in regards to who will replace Stanton Friedman, who will be the next Stanton Friedman. And I think that's really sort of what this conversation is sort of about. Who can fill those shoes? And I would say at this point, I'm not sure if anyone really can. He sort of had his own, but it puts the rest of us to task now, that we need to kind of fill in that this huge gap that he's left. I didn't necessarily agree with Stanton on his ufological beliefs. I didn't actually always agree with how he approached the interpretation of the phenomenon, but it doesn't mean that I thought he was wrong or we just had differing opinions on something. But I always respected his work. I wrote about it in a Mysterious Universe article. He was one of those funny individuals. Philip Klass went after him, and even basically told him, I'll give you $100 for every time you can prove this little UFO thing, right? Like the MJ12 documents, right? The typeface. If you can prove the typeface on the MJ12 documents is used in other reports and stuff like that, I'll give you $100 for every instance. And sure enough, Stanton provided him with 14 examples of other documents that had the same typeface. And, class eventually paid him $1,000 to, as a sort of, okay, he made good on his bet. This is who the guy was. And as a community, I don't know if anyone else is really like that, who can kind of carry that type of gravitas,
Yeah, you make a good point, because, the good and the evil in ufology, it's kind of seen like...
Oh. Hello?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm going to have to make a note, fix that. But there's just some background noise here. Make a note at a time. Okay. Yeah, there's kind of the good and the evil. There's the Stanton versus the Phil class. But the example you gave is kind of this good-natured ribbing, where you don't really have that. Kind of the people on either side these days, especially online, are typically going at it and being very cruel and mean to each other often.
I think that's a sign maybe of what's changed. I think Stanton took the phenomenon seriously, but he didn't take it too seriously. He left room in there to laugh about it and realize that it's just UFOs, let's relax. That type of mentality, that sort of more relaxed. This isn't the be all and the end all of everything. I mean, he was also a family man, right? He had wife, kids. So at the end of the day, he had other things in his life that were more important than the UFO phenomenon to him. And I think that's what maybe for some researchers, especially for the researchers who are online, the UFOs have become sort of an all-consuming facet. Everything to them is UFOs, and they've forgotten to just sort of laugh at things sometimes. Like you say, that good-natured ribbing is no longer just good-natured ribbing. It's viewed as assault, and it's viewed as harassment.
Right.
When in reality, it's just UFOs, right? Let's just relax a little bit. We don't need to take everything so seriously. We need to be able to laugh at ourselves, and we need to be able to laugh at the phenomenon a little bit. Because at the end of the day, it is a little absurd and it is a little silly. And that's just part of it. That's just part of the phenomenon. It's just part of the whole game.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think that you've put that very, very well. And which kind of gets us to your book. So your book's been out for about a month now, and it's called The UFO People. On the cover is another icon who unfortunately I never got to meet before he passed away, who is Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who fortunately the public is getting to know more through the History Channel show. But in a nutshell, if someone asked you, especially, and I'm sure they will, and in these interviews they probably do, I mean, who are the UFO people?
Yeah, this is sort of a really difficult question to answer, because the purpose of the book is to try to figure out really what the UFO community is about, or at least to sort of paint as good a picture as possible. And what the book does is it problematizes our interpretation of what it means to be a subculture or to be a community. Mm-hmm. There really is no dividing line that separates sort of the UFO community or the UFO people from really other groups. It gets really blurry. And not only that, there's no real body or organization that governs our subculture, right? We have our identity is very fluid, and it moves around a lot. And not only that, it mixes in with other communities. So I know a lot of paranormal investigators who are interested in UFOs. Does that make them part of the UFO community? I know a lot of cryptozoologists who are interested in UFOs. I know a lot of UFO enthusiasts who are interested in Bigfoot. So ultimately, there's a lot of this intermixing. And what we find is the UFO community or the UFO people is this sort of large, very blurry mix of people who we can kind of compartmentalize into smaller groups or smaller subcultures. But again, there's no hard and fast line. And the book kind of ultimately tries to call into question the very notion of ought there to be a differentiation between a UFO community and just the general public or the mainstream, right? We often paint that line. We say, no, there is a UFO subculture, there is a UFO community, and then there's the mainstream public. And the book kind of challenges that notion. The book calls into question the validity of that claim and whether the mainstream is actually more involved in the UFO discourse than we care to think, and the UFO community is much more involved in the mainstream. And fundamentally, how do we coexist, and how do we work together and function together? So that's one big aspect of the book that I try to address.
Which, I love that. And right now, I think that this perspective or this examination is even more important because it seems as though there is kind of a crisis of identity of this group, because you're making this argument that you all are more mainstream than you realize, and there are more mainstream in this than you may realize, where it seems like there are a lot of people rebelling against that idea who are like, no, I'm a UFO person, I'm the one with the knowledge, and they don't know what I know.
Right, and the book clearly sort of draws that draws that idea out. When you kind of look at the mythologies that exist in the mainstream about the UFO community and the UFO phenomenon itself, and then when you look at the mythologies that exist sort of about UFOs within the UFO community itself as well, we realize that these mythologies kind of bounce off one another. They're sort of symbiotic, right? The world events, media culture, books, TV, internet, posters, whatever, all really tie into how we've interpreted the UFO phenomenon to be. And we often compartmentalize the UFO phenomenon in all of its strangeness into little boxes to try and make it make sense. So, we like the notion of the grays, for example, because they're easy to understand versus sort of a more complicated, overarching phenomenon that's kind of universal or archetypal in some way that we can't really master or get a grasp on. I can understand a humanoid. I can't understand some weird mystical phenomena that doesn't make sense. But often the UFO enigma occurs in weird mystical ways, and sometimes it occurs in just a simple kind of gray showing up on your front door. So, we need to uncompartmentalize ourselves, and we need to uncompartmentalize our ideology around the phenomenon to start making sense of it. And the book goes into how media and how language and how culture and how economics and politics, how history all ties into the shaping of the UFO as an idea, and then how our community has kind of processed this mythology over the decades.
And it's so interesting that you say that. And, I know that because we've talked before, you gravitate towards this idea of, things are more complicated. There could be more answers out there. But it is, in the UFO community, and I think and people say this exact thing. Why do we have to re-examine? Because we already know. They've kind of fitted into this Star Trek world. We know there's the reptilians, there's these guys, there's the grays, and here's what they're doing and why. We already know this, so why do you have to question it? And they get frustrated when you're like, well, do we really know that?
No, yeah, I agree. It's when you really start to look at these ideas, obviously you see them appearing in the media, you see them appearing in film and television and in books and in magazines and comic books, sort of before and after, like sort of simultaneously as they enter into the UFO community, right? You kind of see these ideas kind of merging and meshing. We have, action comics or whatever, told stories about strange aliens with large gray heads, in the 1920s, well before sort of grays became a thing. So we can kind of question, you're right, how do we know that the reptilians are real or that there's an alien human hybrid program? Like, how do we know this, right? I think what we can kind of rest on is people are having experiences right? So people are experiencing these strange things. People are experiencing being taken by insect-like aliens or Nordic-looking type aliens or whatever. But are those experiences objectively true in the sense that they're seeing sort of the objective reality of the situation, or are these experiences occurring but they're being filtered through various mediums such as language and culture and society and just like almost a hyper-real interpretation of the objective. So the brain is filtering information to make it make sense, because what this individual is actually dealing with is so far removed from the human equation that it's nonsensical. It doesn't compute in the human mind, so the human mind has to create a sort of a false reality, let's say. That's one potential interpretation. Or the other interpretation is, hell, there could be reptilians running around for all we know, and they are right. I don't know. But unfortunately, there's not enough evidence out there to kind of rest your laurels on either thing. We're still in kind of heavy speculation mode. As Vallée sort of says, we haven't really done the basic work yet to get to a firm understanding and grounding in what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. So when somebody tells me, the reptilians are real, I kind of say, okay, maybe. But have you considered that? And then, I can go down a lot of different paths with that person. And maybe one of the paths is, yep, reptilians are real, but they might not be, and we might be dealing with something else entirely. And what you saw was a reptilian, but it might not have actually been a reptilian. You know what I mean?
Right. And it is... And well, your influences. So is Vallée a big influence for you?
Yeah, I would say Vallée and Keel are both incredible influences for me, because they I think create the most sort of, I don't know, the most sensical hypothesis of the phenomenon, because I believe the phenomenon exists. Like I do believe that UFOs are an objective thing that exists outside of us. Some sort of intelligence is responsible for them, whatever it is. So I'm willing to go there. Like I'm willing to go to weird things happen and it's not us. I'm willing to stand on that stone. But after that, like beyond that stone, I don't know where to go, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go down the road of it's aliens from another planet. I'm not going to go down the road that it's interdimensional beings from some other dimension. The only road that I can kind of see myself going down is that we're dealing with some sort of control system, as Vallée would argue, or some sort of large paranormal system, as Vallée would say, or we're dealing with some sort of intelligence that has maybe, been with us forever and it sort of exists on a separate dimension. I don't know. Like, again, right? Like, these are sort of odd roads to go down, but these are the only ones that kind of make sense to me, because I've investigated UFO reports that range from just lights in the sky to sort of just regular prosaic kind of events, to aliens, to people seeing man-sized rabbits hop out of orbs. So I've investigated some weird high strangeness stuff, and to suggest it's kind of one option or the other doesn't make sense to me, because something's wrong then, right? Like these aliens are then messing with us. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I think what's interesting and what you're describing is, I think, really important. So, for instance, there's kind of two areas. There's the unknown, and we can either make a mythology out of it, so we're comfortable that we know everything, or we can be more Socratic about it, and that's kind of the other side, which is, you're never going to know. We don't know. You think you know this. You don't really know that, which is kind of where the territory Vallée and Keel, especially Keel, moved into, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because in the middle you have science, and there's a danger to resting on your laurels, believing you know the truth when you don't, even when the truth often and the research often leads you down some weird roads like you're talking about, because these weird stories, some of them very credible, they happen. We hear these really odd stories.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why we have to, like you say, remain Socratic. And that's a great term to use. And that's where I tend to stand, I think, because fundamentally, we don't know, and we have to keep asking questions, and we have to remain vigilant, and we have to remain critical. I'll never go to someone and say, listen, you didn't have that experience, right? Because I'm not qualified to give them. Like, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so I'm not necessarily qualified to deal with that. So I will hear their story, and I'll record their story, and I'll treat their story with the respect it deserves. It's sort of their truth at the time. But I'm also not going to adjust my personal philosophy or my personal opinion on the matter because of one story, right? It's going to take a lot more evidence for me to do that. You're really going to have to convince me, and I'm going to require something beyond just storytelling and mythology to do that. So, I don't want to come off sounding like a skeptic, because I'm not a skeptic. I will, like I said, listen, and I will be respectful, and I will hear you out, because, if you experience something, you experience something. I'm not going to contradict that. But I'm also not going to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater here, right? We need to remain critical, because the problem is, once we stop being critical, we start believing everything. And that's why people believe there's reptilians in the Antarctica, and they're controlling the American government. And we go down this rabbit hole of sort of conspiratorial insanity. And that's a problem. It makes us as a community, assuming there is a UFO community, it makes us look foolish when these voices become the popular voices.
And that's, I think, that's what I love about this more intellectual kind of examination of all of this, because it is gray, and all of this is so complicated, no pun intended, but, it's very complicated in that, terms and memes can arrive, and these things kind of influence the way we think about things, and then they can galvanize communities. Whereas, like you mentioned earlier, and I think you have a good argument, that, to say there's a UFO community as if there's this community of people and we all have figured something out, that's not true at all, because as much as there are those who are convinced, there are grays, inside of that group, you've got, we've got these grays, they're so wonderful and they're here to help us. And then you have the other side, no, they're evil and they're trying to kill us. And they're both absolutely convinced, and they're both fairly large groups. The point being that, that it's hard to call, a group like that a community with such varying ideas and such hard stances with those ideas.
No, I agree, and that's part of it, right? There's no agreement, right? There's no unified notion of what the UFO is, or what the source of the UFO phenomenon is. I think we do have an identity, though. So even those people who say the Greys are evil or the Greys are good or whatever, we all kind of have a common identity. I think we all speak a similar language. We all understand what everyone's talking about. So, when we talk, if somebody says Zeton, we know what we mean by that term. Or if somebody says, EBE, we know what that means, right? We all share a similar lexicon of terms. So we are able to communicate as a subculture does. So there are some aspects to us that are very subcultural in the more sort of cultural studies sense, in the very traditional sense, jargon being one. We all also, I think, kind of share a common sort of mistrust of authority, I think, to at least to some extent. You know what I mean? All of us are kind of willing to go down that, maybe something is up, and it ranges, right, to people who are full out, the government is bad, and they're arming themselves, on like this conspiratorial level, to, people like me who generally trust the government, but kind of don't, because, they've done some dubious things in the past. So, we kind of all have this kind of countercultural bend to us, right? We all kind of look awry at the regular daily world, at our government, at authority, and we kind of recognize that something, maybe fishy is going on at the very least. So, when we talk about the subculture as being sort of in constant conflict, it is true. It's basically an anarchy, but there are these little segments of similarities that we can work together on. It's funny, this year's Contact in the Desert is a perfect example.
You know what? Hold on to that, because I was thinking it'd be great if we can start applying examples, but we've got to go to break right now. So we'll be right back with MJ Banias right after this break. Those of you listening on the radio will hear some commercials. The rest will hear a short musical interlude. Hang on tight. We'll be right back with Open Minds UFO Radio. Welcome back to Open Minds UFO Radio. I had a delightful conversation last time you were on, but I'm loving this as well. We're talking to MJ Banias, and we're actually, you were talking about contact in the desert, and I think that'll be fun, is to kind of practically apply some of the things that are happening right now and how they apply to how you're looking at things. But you were about to say how contact in the desert is an example of what you were just describing.
Right. So when we look at the range of ideas within the UFO community, sort of, like I mentioned earlier, it's sort of an anarchy. However, we do share similarities. Contact in the Desert is this sort of perfect example, especially this year's Contact in the Desert, where you have individuals who are on sort of one side, individuals such as David Wilcock, Corey Goode, sharing sort of the same conference with individuals like Jacques Vallée. And the people who will attend this conference, and there's like Contact in the Desert is huge, everyone sort of, while there are issues between these two notions, like in no way does Jacques Vallée agree with David Wilcock. They're not diametrically opposed, but they're pretty close. Everyone still kind of gets along, right? We all still kind of go, we all talk about our experiences or our research, and generally there's no real bad blood. While we might, not like each other and spit vitriol at each other on the internet, generally it's relatively a peaceful scenario. Like there's no necessarily fist fights breaking out in the halls of the resort because you don't believe in the reptilians and you're a Kabbalist in the deep state. Like that doesn't happen.
Right.
At least not recently. So we do have some semblance of unification. We all kind of coexist together. We all speak similar languages. We all engage with each other. Do you hear a whistling right now? Sorry.
Yeah, do.
That's my washing machine.
Well, you know what it reminds me of, what you're describing here, which makes a lot of sense. It makes me think of a couple of things. First of all, it makes me think of, you'll have, let's say, a George Knapp there, or he's a great example. And then the next speaker will come on and talk about how the media is all corrupted and, all of the UFO stories in the media are the MJ-12 is dictating. And, we just heard from George Knapp, who described how he came up with his stories. And it also reminds me of, some of the younger people won't remember Bugs Bunny shows, but there was the Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog. Of course, the Wile E. Coyote was trying to get the sheep, and the sheepdog's beating him up and everything. But then the whistle would blow, and they would go to the time clock, and they would clock in, and say hello to each other. It's so funny.
Well, and it's so true, right? I mean, literally, the UFO conferences are quite interesting because you will have speakers sort of totally disagree with each other. And then at times, like, I wonder, the audience just kind of sits there and like nods and smiles during both. And you're like, wait, how do you agree with these? I'm confused. They're both saying the opposite things. I don't understand why you agree, So I do find it humorous at times.
That is the one that really gets me. I mean, people will go to a lecture.
Yeah.
And this will be a guy who will be talking about, using the example that I was using before, who will talk about, the Greys are real. I've met them and I've talked to them and they're wonderful and they're helping us out. And here's what they've done to help us throughout history. And people will come out and go, oh my gosh, that was absolutely amazing. And then they'll come out of the next lecture, and this lecturer just said, "Oh, the Greys are evil. They're screwing us. They're doing all this terrible stuff to us." And they'll come out, "Oh my gosh, that talk was amazing." And I'll ask people, "Well, how could you?" The last speaker was saying that this person is wrong, and there's no way that they're right, and had a totally different view. And people will just kind of look at you and just say, "Well, I don't know. I think there could be truth to both."
Right.
And that's what really, that is truly a correct usage of the term of the where you believe two different things and
insanity.
They're both completely opposite of each other.
Like cognitive dissonance?
Cognitive dissonance.
Is that what it is?
Exactly. And people throw that term around all the time, but they completely misuse it. They say, "Oh, there's cognitive dissonance because we know aliens are real, but people don't believe it." And it's like, no, people don't know that. That's why it's when you absolutely believe in two different opposite things, that's when things get screwy.
It's really funny. But again, it's the community and just the way I think we function. Like I said, we at times want to stick together because we have this fear that there's sort of this larger group outside of us, this sort of mainstream public that is on the attack, and it's not necessarily true, but we cultures will clump together for sort of out of self-preservation. So I think that happens even though once we're all together inside the group, we like start to fight with one another, right? Which you sort of see all the time in the UFO community. These sort of conflicts that arise between individuals, and often over just like we were talking about much earlier, class and Friedman, over some ribbing that occurs, and it blows up into all-out war where lines are being drawn and you need to pick a side and you're either with us or you're against us. And, if you don't believe in what we believe in, we'll name and shame you. And like it becomes quite bad. Yeah.
Yep, I've been name and shamed. Have you been name and shamed? Sure you have.
I'm sure I have. Yeah, I've once in a while you say things on a podcast or something, and then people go after you, and you're just like, okay, relax. And then that didn't help. Like when you tell people to relax, they don't relax. In fact, they become angry. Yeah. So
there's no winning. There's another faction of this that I'd love to hear your perspective on too. So getting back to Valet, there's a talk I do on religion and UFOs, and I'm essentially drawing similarities. And Valet had a great point all the way back in the 70s when he addressed the UN. He said the government really has to take the lead on the research and all of this, because if you don't, then the mythologists and the conspiracists, they're all just going to make stuff up. And we're going to have UFO religions, and we're going to have a lot of confusion out there that'll be generated from the public if you don't get involved and kind of help guide the public. But nowadays, coming into the present, that may be viewed as a bit of a naive kind of perception that we would want to trust the government. And then here comes the government. Here comes Lou Elizondo and ATIP and the Navy saying we're going to do, create these UFO guidelines. So now you have a third party that is kind of trying to guide us. But is this third party a guiding light, or is it, can this voice be completely trusted?
Right. Yeah, it's really murky, because a huge aspect of the conspiratorial sort of anti-government nature of the UFO discourse, a good chunk of it didn't all start, but a good chunk of it began in the 1980s after the whole Doty, Benowitz, Bill Moore thing. You had a huge sort of uproar in the UFO community because one of their own was used as a sort of active disinformation agent and spy, basically, as Bill Moore sort of admitted in, I think it was 89. Mm-hmm. So you had a whole group of UFO sort of enthusiasts and researchers who went through this era where massive distrust was formed for the government, because the belief was that the government purposefully disinforms the public on the UFO phenomenon. Tie that in with every single kind of tropish mythology of alien bodies and bunkers, Dulce, New Mexico being some massive underground cavernous, base where aliens got into laser gun fights with Marines, whatever, right? Like this massive, strange collection of myths and stories spun out in the 1980s to form really what we're dealing with, I think, today.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been mistrust. Kehoe talked about it, but it wasn't to the same effect, I don't think, as it sort of occurred in the 80s and into now. And really what occurred in the late 80s and into the 90s was really the seeds of the disclosure movement, right? The government knows everything. Not only that, they have bodies. They have downed UFOs that they've recovered at crash sites, and they're storing them, and they're reverse engineering them, and the whole Bob Lazar thing, right? Really, you got to the seeds of this notion of disclosure really started to sort of plant and take root in the 80s and the 90s, and now we're dealing with the full-blown plant, right? We're dealing with actually a forest that is disclosure right now, this disclosure movement, right? Exopolitics. And it's really tough to pull yourself out of that history, because ultimately our culture is formed by that history. The UFO community is formulated by those historical ideas, and now we're having to try and disassociate ourselves from that. No one wants to be another Benowitz, right? And no one wants to bump into another Doty. Sorry, Richard. Mm-hmm. But no one does, right? No one wants to become that guy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of caution, I think, in the UFO community, because we've been duped before. Mm-hmm. We've been duped since the 50s, but we've been duped before, and it really stung in the 80s. So I can imagine why some UFO researchers, especially those who lived through the 80s and were really into UFOs in the 80s and were kind of part of that collection of people, are going to remain hesitant and are going to remain cautious with this whole ATIP, to the stars thing. The younger generation, people like myself who were not involved in the 80s, that's history to me. It's a history lesson. It's not something I experienced personally. So I'm going to approach it from a different angle, potentially. I'm not going to have the same reservations. However, I'm also not an idiot, and I'm not going to necessarily approach it blindly either and just, jump into the pool without looking what's in the water first. So I think, to get the long way around here to your question, to answer it, is there needs to sort of still be vigilance. I think we still need to kind of be critical. We need to be open-minded that we're not being duped, or this isn't some sort of government thing. But we also need to kind of pay attention to the history that's been with the UFO community for a long time. There is a history of disinformation and manipulation to manage the message, as Noam Chomsky says, to manufacture our consent. Because ultimately that's kind of what a lot of UFO discourse is, right? You're manufacturing stories so that we buy into them.
Right.
And then we chase that goose versus sort of the actual objective.
Mm-hmm. Right. That makes sense. Yeah. And what inspired you to do this? What inspired you to write the book?
In university, my background is in culture studies and critical theory and philosophy and history. So my interest is in how communities form and how cultures form. And I've always kind of been into UFOs and science fiction and that kind of thing. So it was kind of just a natural progression for me. I met some interesting people. I met Chris Rutkowski, who kind of pushed me into this world. I started doing research, realized how interesting it was, and that the UFO community was a very unique subculture. I'm prepared to argue, and I do argue in the book, that the UFO community is unlike all other subcultures, because we're not just about UFOs, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on with the UFO community. There's religious, like you said earlier, there's sort of a religious component. There's a philosophical component. There's an economic component. There's a political component. So when we compare ourselves to other subcultures, not many have the same. Not many have the same sort of varied array of ideologies and sort of things that structure identity like we do. Mm-hmm. So I argue sort of towards the end of the book that we need to look at the UFO subculture differently. We are not a subculture per se, but we're actually, and I refer to us, I sort of use the term we're an exoculture. Because it's not that we're alien in any way, but we sort of mirror this alien in a sense. We are other. We're so othered from the mainstream. We kind of challenge the mainstream and toss it on its head, and force it to kind of look at itself, because we almost represent it in some weird mirror way. So I don't want to spoil too much about the book, but that's kind of where the book concludes. Mm-hmm. That we are so different from other subcultures that we can't really refer to ourselves as a subculture.
See, and I think that's a great argument, because it's something, of course, I'm thinking of all the time in positioning. Where do we position ourselves, and how do I position myself, or how with Open Minds, how do we position Open Minds, trying to be a journalistic organization that is more akin to organizations that are not in the UFO community, that are, news organizations. And, right. And I even find that kind of dichotomy with my fellow people in the press, where it's kind of like, luckily they're usually very open, especially the publicists and stuff, but scientists not so much. It's kind of like they do see a difference between UFO people and other people, and it's very odd. And even as you're speaking, I'm thinking of what are other groups that are similar, and I can't think of one.
Yeah, no. I would say there's not really there's not many other subcultures that have in their sort of structure of identity something that could potentially invade the planet. You know what I mean? Like, right. No one's really dealing with that in their subculture. So we have sort of incredible political ideologies present in our subculture, and we often lap in these incredible conspiratorial communities, right? The QAnon conspiracies has somehow kind of integrated into the UFO community, right? You have sort of the deep state and sort of Kabbalism and Luciferianism integrating itself into the UFO community, right? So we're this odd community of individuals who have this sort of weird stuff kind of constantly popping into it. And like I said, it often does have political movements. I was talking to someone recently, there's a UFO, he's a UFO guy. He's kind of an enthusiast, but he talks about how like Marxism and communism and socialism are starting to kind of, and very highly leftist ideologies starting to kind of find themselves into UFO communities. So, we're evolving and we're changing. It's an interesting little community we live in.
And sort of growing. I mean, it's morphing. It's kind of like as this information, especially this new, more credible information, as the Navy adopts, kind of a pro-UFO stance, it seems like the concept of this community kind of grows, and at the same time, and maybe this is a fear with a lot of people, dissipates in a way as far as its cohesiveness.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I think if To the Stars has sort of shown us anything, it's that as technology improves, especially in regards to military technology, we're starting to get evidence now of potential, UFO events or paranormal incidents that can't just be written off as a pilot seeing something, or as a radar operative who just didn't get too much, just who hasn't gotten enough sleep, right? Like now there's enough technology now that we're starting to track a lot of this stuff, and we're getting a lot of corroborative evidence of different phenomena. I'm sure we can have a debate as to the validity of some of these cases, but regardless, what's not in question is we're getting a lot better at tracking stuff and seeing stuff. All of our technology is getting much more conducive to seeing stuff that it shouldn't see, right? So this is going to definitely change the UFO discourse, right? TTSA as a cultural movement has shifted the discourse already. The ufology and UFO research is now different because of Tom DeLonge, Lou Elizondo, and the rest coming together. And again, we can debate whether it's better or worse. That's not what I'm here to talk about.
Right.
All I'm here to talk about is just the discourse has shifted, right? We now view the UFO phenomenon differently than we did in 2016. So I think that we're going to see the importance of TTSA the further down in time, or the further sort of forward in time we go.
Right.
And again, I want to stress, like, what I mean by importance is their influence. And again, I don't want to talk about good or bad. I just want to kind of talk about that they are quite an importantly sort of influential cultural organization for our subculture. And I wrote in 2017, like, there's no point in talking about whether to the Stars is good or bad. It doesn't matter. What's going to happen, though, is it's going to really change things. It's going to change the game. And I stated this 2 years ago, and I'm happy that I'm okay to kind of keep falling back on those words because I think I'm right, and I think it's going to play out. We're dealing with something that like, something's begun and we're not sure where it's going, and it's going to become totally different in 5 years. The conversation we're going to be having in 5 years is going to be unbelievable.
I think you're right, and what I find interesting too is as people kind of who view themselves, who really their identity is around all of this UFO stuff. I think that they sometimes feel entitled, or at least to have to be able to say, well, you're not one of us because you weren't here in the get-go, and you're a Tom DeLonge follower, and you can't be one of us. We're not accepting you. But really, when you have especially someone like him who already has this very cohesive, strong community built, and if they say, hey, we're here, there's nothing you can do about it, they're absolutely right. There is nothing anybody who would wish to do something about it could do something about it. So despite how people may want things to go, it's kind of these major shifts that are happening despite people liking them or not.
Right. Yeah, I agree. You see all these feuds online that occur, right, between different groups and different individuals within the UFO community as to whether TTSA is good or bad, or whether their evidence is good or bad. And I personally have been on both sides. Like, I'm perfectly fine to point out that the chain of custody documentation on some of this stuff is still missing, or we don't have it yet. Maybe it's still classified, whatever. The point is, we're not really sure where some of this content comes from. And that's a fair statement. I'm not being critical I think TTSA is good or bad by saying that. I'm just simply pointing it out because I tend to believe I'm a hack journalist whose duty it is to kind of point that stuff out. Mm-hmm. So where people kind of get stuck, though, is again in that you're either with us or against us mentality, right, like you mentioned, right? And fundamentally, it doesn't matter. Like, fundamentally, it doesn't matter whether you're pro-TTSA or anti-TTSA, because that ship has sailed. Like, at this point, you're kind of pissing into the wind now. Like, exactly. Move on, right? Move on, because it's here and it's not going anywhere. And at the end of the day, all the people who are pro-TTSA, all the people who are anti-TTSA, they're not going anywhere either, right? So just stop yelling at each other, right? It's a distraction. Like, you're clogging up my Twitter feed. And let me get to the stuff I actually need to look at in order to do proper research or stay in touch with the people I need to stay in touch with. So, that's my inherent beef with the UFO community sometimes is we waste a lot of time, I think, going after one another for things that we can't control anymore.
Right.
If To the Stars is the boulder that's rolling down the mountain, there's no point in standing in front of it, because you're just going to get hit or you're going to jump out of the way. That ball's rolling. So I don't know. You don't need to follow it or anything, but
yeah. I think that's an important message. You got to deal, because it's here.
Yeah.
So,
cool. Yeah.
I guess my final question would be, because we're about out of time, is the future. What do you see as the future for this UFO community, or for, I guess, the impact on this interest in the broader society?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a few things. I think we're going to see, like I mentioned sort of just now, TTSA's influence sort of growing and spreading. We're going to see, I think, a lot more public discourse in the mainstream concerning UFOs. What's not going to change is not going to be discussions about, intelligent others or aliens or, anything like that. It's going to be kind of the same status quo line of people are seeing unidentified things in the sky. It doesn't mean it's aliens. It's just they're unidentified. So, let's start looking at this a little closer. So I think I think we're going to kind of see that shift to a more open discourse about the fact that anomalous phenomena occur. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be one shift. I think we're going to start to see a slow decline, if it's not already happening, of some of these other individuals who make bold claims about, being soldiers on Mars, fighting blue chickens. I think we're going to start to see that stuff wane a little bit. You're always going to have kind of the UFO religious aspect, but I think that sort of group is going to, the steam of that is going to start depleting, and they're going to just kind of run out of steam within the next 5 years or so. I think that just people are going to move on. Those are sort of my two predictions, at least because I think the UFO, I think we're going to go through a wave of UFO sort of enlightenment in the next 5 years. I think the Scientific Coalition for Ufology is a good move. I think they are going to maybe shed some more light, at least intellectually, on the phenomenon. And I think people who are interested in UFOs are going to jump on that bandwagon rather than, time traveling humans and sort of the more ridiculous aspects of the discourse. Sorry, I don't mean to use the term ridiculous. The more out there interpretations of the discourse. Because at the end of the day, we're all kind of unified by our interest in the UFO phenomenon. And if we can achieve that interest by looking at it in ways that make sense, we're going to do that versus going to ways that don't make sense. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean the far out stuff's going to disappear. It will always sort of be there.
Right. But maybe reined in a bit. I mean, because of course you have conspiracies in every genre of thought, and so they'll certainly be there, but maybe just not quite as wild as it is.
Yeah, I think we'll see a growth of ufology that is, like I said, more reasoned, more rational, more logical. I think that's going to occur. It goes through waves. I think it's going to kind of go up and down. So I think we're going to kind of enter that era for the next little bit. Mm-hmm. I'm sure eventually that will go away and we'll go back to the totally woo-woo, like wild stuff. But we're going to enjoy for the next few years, hopefully, this more rational version of ufology.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Where's the best place for people to go to get more MJ and also to get your book?
Sure. So if you want to buy my book, it's available all over where books are sold. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those places. However, if you wanted sort of the one-stop shop for my content, you can go to my website, which is www.mjbanias.com, or my blog, which is www.terraobscura.net, and that will link to everything that I do, all my different articles. So you can check those two out, as well as my YouTube channel. It's brand new. Well, it's not brand new. It's a couple months old now, but my YouTube channel is youtube.com/MJ or you can just go to YouTube and type in my name, MJ Banias. And I'm trying to actually get to 1,000 subscribers by July 31st, and we're getting close. So if you're on the YouTube and you sort of see my content, please go to my channel and click subscribe. I release a video every Tuesday, and I have my live show every Thursday called Cafe Obscura. So there's always plenty of new stuff popping up on that channel.
Well, you know what? There was a lot I wanted to talk to you, especially related to your YouTube and some of what you've been releasing there. But you know what? We'll just do this again in a few weeks, and then maybe we can help generate some more likes for your page and everything there that way. But yeah, let's do this again in a few weeks to talk about some of those other topics. I wanted to cover the book stuff right now, but thank you so much. That was super interesting, and thanks again for coming on the show.
It has been a pleasure. It's always an honor to be on Open Minds. Thank you.
Thank you so much to MJ for being on the show once again. Be sure to check him out at Terra Obscura. That is terraobscura.net. You might even have a hard time spelling that. It's TERRA, second word OBSCURA. If you just Google that, you'll find him. I'm sure if you just Google his name, you can spell his last name Banias, MJ Banias. So I love these talks. I mean, a lot of you are like, I want to hear more about TTSA and hate tip. Of course, we've been beating that to death, but there's more and more news coming out on a regular basis, like you heard that me and Martin discussing at the beginning of the show. However, I think this stuff is important too. Self-reflective, thinking of the effect on society as a whole, and then also, how we fit into things. And I think that this discussion is really important because I think he's very insightful in this idea of, this non-cohesiveness when it comes into interest in these sort of things. So I thought that was a great discussion, very insightful. So I highly recommend that you all follow what MJ is up to and check him out at Terra Obscura. I also want to thank those of you who are new Patreon patrons. So thank you to Kevin, Duncan, Frode, Mark, Jamie, Frode. I'm not sure if I'm spelling that. Maybe it was Frode. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. But thank you all. Anyway, we had that t-shirt giveaway last time, so that will be getting mailed out soon to the winner. And then I'll be posting on Patreon some more stuff here soon also. Now, I did say that when I went to Oregon, I'd post some exclusive stuff. It just, it's hard for me because I like to share with everybody what I'm up to. So I was going to do that last bit of audio, exclusive for just my patrons. But sorry, patrons, I decided to share that with everybody. However, I do have some cool stuff that I will be sharing with just you all. And the cool thing about being a patron too is you keep up to speed on everything I'm doing because I update and post there, and then we can converse back and forth as well. It's definitely the best way to converse with me unless you send me an email, because on social media, it's rare that I can get to answer everybody who asks me questions. But so anyway, thank you so much to my patrons. Again, we'll have more exclusive info. And for those of you who are not patrons on my Patreon, please consider doing so, because I do giveaways, I give exclusive information, and it helps me keep in this business, because if I'm not making money, I can't really do much. And, this is in defense of people who do charge. I know a lot of you pay for Martin Willis's podcast, and I do not. You'll notice in entertainment or in media, especially everybody's figuring out how to make money these days online. And this stuff, you can't get it done without money. A lot of people complain, why do we have to charge for this, that, or the other? But if we weren't charging, then it wouldn't happen. That's just the way the world works. Nothing's for free, and not all of us are billionaires like Bigelow or Elon Musk or something where we can spend a ton of money and time doing this. So, that's why you should. Anybody that you like that's doing some good work, patronize them. Don't complain about having to pay to see one of their lectures or something. You should feel good about supporting these people and their work. I certainly do. I buy books from these people. I love to go on, and I'm a patron for several other people on Patreon myself. So a lot of good stuff going on out there that you have to check out. Speaking of which, Dave Beatty, we had him on not too long ago, filmmaker. He did this Nimitz Encounter documentary. That's one of the things that there's a link to that in the Open Minds news on the front page. So go check that out, because he just posted a new version and it's great. He's got more witnesses and lots of cool stuff going on there. Also, the intern International UFO Congress. Of course, there's always stuff going there. I told you guys to buy those lamps quickly because, of course, they all sold out, those levitating UFO lamps at the UFO Congress store. But we will be getting in more. Also, some of you might have noticed that we will be at AlienCon. So I'm going to be speaking there. That's in LA. But I'll be doing a bunch of talks there, June 21st to the 23rd. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and as usual. And we bring tons of stuff. So if you want to come say hi or actually purchase the stuff from us, that's cool too. So you'll see the UFO Congress there and me doing talks. Otherwise, let's see what else is going on. I think that's everything. But we are posting more and more speakers as the time goes on. We've got some more exciting speakers to post for the UFO Congress. You'll definitely want to be there. And if you register this week, that means the week of, what is today, the 27th. If you register by June 1st, you can use the code SAVE20, uppercase SAVE, save 30, uppercase SAVE 30, and you'll get 30 days off of multi-day passes. And you'll see that our passes are very affordable, especially compared to others out there. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I hope you guys show up and come say hi. It's always fun to hang out with you. That is it for today's show. I want to say thank you to Caleb Hanks for the opening and close music. Thank you to Systematics for the bumper music. Thank you to Martin Willis of Podcast UFO for joining us with the news. And of course, thank you to MJ Banias for being a wonderful guest yet again on the show. And of course, I want to thank you, the listeners, for listening. Guess what we got next week? That's right, the big show with Lou Elizondo. And so far, everything's looking good. I think it's really going to happen. So it looks like this will be the first interview post-show. So if the unidentified show is going to air on Friday, I'm going to be interviewing him soon after that, and then we'll post that next week for you all. So thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, adios muchachos.